Have you ever made a decision out of fear? And maybe in the moment, you didn't know that it was fear. The fear that someone might be angry with you if you do something. The fear of, I know I would hide my grades when they weren't good enough for my parents out of fear of being punished. And the truth is, at some point, we've all made a decision out of fear. Now, sometimes we're continuing to make those decisions out of fear, and sometimes we're able to see the fear for what it is and still go in divine alignment. So in today's video, we're really going to discuss fear and what's happening with your body when you're making these decisions out of fear, and how you can adjust yourself to be able to move forward without it. Hi, I'm Christin. I am energy alchemist and transformational prosperity coach. I am here to help you live your best life, to understand the emotions behind your decisions, and to really, truly have joy in everything that you do from when you wake up in the morning, to really feel that gratitude for the life that you're living. So let's get started. When we make decisions out of fear, we are compounding a problem that is already there. And it has the opportunity to shift and change if we allow it. Now, for me, in the past, I've stayed in relationships longer than I should have because I was fearful of losing someone or that I would be alone. I have made decisions to not share my grades as a little kid because I didn't want to get punished at home. So whatever those decisions might be, there's an underlying cause as to why we're not sharing something or doing something. And it can be nerve-wracking, like physically debilitating nerve-wracking. So I see a lot of clients that have this worry and this anxiety that are at all-time high levels. And when they're getting these migraines, their bodies are literally telling them to slow down, to stop thinking. And yet the first thing that we do is we try to be on the computer and the phone and to see what's going on with us because we want an answer, when we can numb the pain, but we're not getting to the root cause. And I was just watching a video today that really resonated with me, especially throughout my healing journey. I used to actually have debilitating migraines that would last months, weeks and months, not just days, not just a night, not just one day. It would last for a very long time. And I remember sitting in my doctor's office, and he prescribed me some very high-dose narcotics. And I realized that that's not what I wanted to take for the rest of my life. And I made a decision right then and there that it had gone too far. These migraines and whatever was causing them had to stop. I made a decision. I drew a line in the sand because I was not going to live my life on pills to get through the workday. And I decided to go the route of figuring it out, the root cause. It took many more years than that initial decision. However, it's the best decision I did, because when you go to heal a bone, if you broke a bone and it's not right, you just put a cast on it, right? No, you fix the bone, you realign the bone, you go to the root, and you make sure that it's straight before you do anything else. So when it came to my migraine, I had layers of emotions that I was working through. And as I worked through those layers of emotions, I was able to really see why I was making certain decisions, why I was so fearful of being alone, why it was so hard for me to stop people pleasing. I even made it a point when I was doing puppy rescue that I really wanted to keep this puppy. And the reason I wanted to keep this puppy, even though it didn't align with any of my goals, wasn't that I was fearful that the dog wouldn't find the right home. I was fearful of me being alone because my dog was becoming older and I didn't know how much longer she had left. So I could have made a decision completely based out of fear. And it wouldn't have been the right decision for me without getting to not only my values, but getting to the core roots of my being, which was being afraid of being alone. Now, when it comes to, I love you, buddy. So when it came to my migraine and realizing that I really couldn't function in my day-to-day life without taking medicine, I started to understand that I had PTSD and had layers of that to work through from my childhood. And I want to say something about PTSD is the ways that we all experience life are different. So somebody can be in the exact same scenario, standing right next to you, listening to the same vibrations of the words being spoken, and have a very different experience because of the DNA, the cells, the codes that we have within us. And so somebody else might have a traumatic experience and someone else might be completely okay. Case in point, I was swimming in the ocean. In the ocean, I'm very comfortable in the ocean. And there was a few other ladies there that weren't as comfortable in the ocean. And when the waves came rolling in, it was a little chaotic, and for me, it was kind of what the waves do. But for them, it wasn't something that they had really experienced, and it was very traumatic. And so when someone has these things going on and they've experienced this high fear state, they've experienced this high state of alertness, and the fear of almost dying is very different than me going like, oh yeah, I kind of like got my foot stuck on the rock, but it was fine, like no big deal. And their experience was completely valid. And so we don't know what everyone is going through. And we can be a little cold-hearted sometimes when we don't take the time or the energy to listen, and making sure that we have the space to listen, because if I had that fear and tried to listen to them in that point in time, it would have just egged on the fear. But there are definitely moments where we can connect with someone on a deeper level to really understand. And the point that I'm making here is when I was going through this really dark night of the soul, we'll call it, I was dating someone who thought that they understood what PTSD was because their sister had it. And the way that he would talk to me and how I should just get over it, it was, I can feel it in my heart, right? It was awful. It was so awful to have your experience invalidated. It was so awful to really share with someone that I'm not feeling okay, and I understand that I'm getting better, but I'm not better right now, and it takes time for me to do this. I'm not a person that goes like this all the time. There are days that I can, and there are days that I couldn't. And that PTSD and those triggers and those traumas were constant at that point in my life. And so they would be triggered by work, by somebody speaking up too loudly. Nothing that they did wrong, but it was how I was experiencing life. So when we make these decisions out of a fear, like staying in that relationship that I knew wasn't good for me, I stayed in another relationship that wasn't good for me when I very clearly saw how he was addicted to gambling and pills, yet I was staying with him because I was so afraid to be alone. And so when we draw those lines in the sand and we're able to understand what it is that was driving those decisions, we can have more compassion for ourselves, because at the end of the day, I was beating myself up. I was beating myself up for, you're afraid to be alone, but you're continuing to allow this in your life. And see, you're not good enough. You can't get another guy. No one's going to love you. And I would have all of these things repeated in my head. Of course I was going to get a migraine because I was doing the thing that I didn't want to be doing, and I was beating myself up for every decision that I was making. And there were days in that last relationship where I wasn't feeling well, and he would make sure that I had food or water and draw me a bath. So there were like these little moments that were, these little nuggets that were amazing. But I knew that I deserved someone who could do that on a consistent basis, that wasn't going to make me feel bad for my feelings, and to help me get to the root cause. So as I understood these things about myself and got to the root cause of the fear and got to the root cause of why I was making these poor decisions by judging myself and what others were thinking of me, I was just compounding the amount of guilt and shame in my body. And if you look at an emotional scale, guilt and shame are very low on the emotional spirals and frequencies. And so when you're focusing on that lower end of the spectrum, the joy and the fun just seem to disappear out of your life, and it takes so much more for you to function at this level. What I didn't understand at the time was a lot of these decisions that were being made out of fear can actually also be used to have very stable, grounded ways of moving forward when we understand the emotions and the traumas or the triggers behind it. So understanding that I was afraid to be alone was actually more empowering, because I knew that I was very capable of being alone. And to have my own energy and my own space was more important to me than trying to get someone to love me, which we can't do anyway, right? So throughout these decisions that I made, I realized that while fear had been driving the decisions, I could also use it for stability. And if I was fearful of being alone, how could I actually use that to my benefit? Well, I looked at all the ways that I was actually already alone in that scenario, in that situation, because I was making the decisions, I was paying the bills. The things that this person was adding to my life wasn't actually providing the joy and the ease of my life, right? It was actually taking energy away. And so as I understood more and more about this, I was able to take back my power, to take back those scenarios that felt so draining. And as I took back my power and I understood these fears, the overthinking and the worry of like, oh, I'll always be alone, like they started to disappear. Mind you, I also do believe, and I do teach this because everything is energy. I did change my diet. I was working out. I was finding ways to release my energy. And even after I had quit my corporate life, which most of my migraines had pretty much subsided by then, I didn't get them very often, but I did get a few, especially towards the end when I was really not able to put up the boundaries as well as I would have liked in between work and play, and in between what was a work responsibility and what was not. I would continue to work, as a lot of you probably have experienced, where a client needs something, so we just continue to work even though we have things to do with our family and our friends. And understanding those values and the priorities came for me later after the corporate life, and understanding how I make these decisions and how I can make them in a stable, grounded sense, and to understand the emotions behind it, to understand the frustration of when I would get mad and angry and I just shut down completely because I didn't know how to feel my feelings. And because I didn't know how to feel my feelings, I judged myself. And because I judged myself, I'd get a migraine. And so, and if I judged myself that I couldn't do something, it gave me an even bigger migraine. So I learned through time to really move forward by breaking it apart, to really understanding those feelings. And the first time that I actually remember realizing that I didn't know how to feel my feelings was about 26, 27-ish. And the psychologist put in front of me a scale of 1 to 10 of emotions. And she said, okay, so when you start to get stressed out, what's it at? And I told her, and she goes, and then what's the emotion that you feel right before you get stressed out? And I realized that I went from like a 4 or a 5 to a 9 or a 10. I didn't actually feel the feelings in between. And so when you don't feel the feelings in between, it looks to someone like you just completely lost it and you're taking things out of proportion, when the thing was my body didn't even know how to process those emotions. So over the last few years, I've really dedicated a lot of my time, and I said it at that age as well, that I wanted to help people to understand their emotions. I wanted to understand more about the emotions, and I realized like our emotions actually are in every cell of our being, and when we suppress them and we don't talk about them, we make it worse. And that's why there is so much more disease in this world right now. That's why when we suppress things, that there's bigger, angrier outbursts. And when we provide that safe place for people to understand their emotions, to feel the emotions, and emotions are like 90 seconds. There are times where we can grieve for a few days and things like that, but for the most part, if an emotion can really truly run its course, it's about 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Just imagine if you were a toddler and you could just scream for 90 seconds and then like all of a sudden you're like, yep, okay, I'm good to go. Well, it can actually be that easy, and with each layer that kind of comes with it. I might be frustrated for a moment now, and then I understand like where the frustration's actually coming from. I can also be frustrated for hours if I am in my head about it and not getting into my body. And so it's taken me a while to really understand how to understand the emotions that are showing up in our body, because our body is very intuitive, like I said, and when we hurt our right hand versus our left hand, it can mean something different and can actually provide us a way to figure out what's going on. So when we make decisions out of fear, we're making it from known aspects of our mind, things that we've filed in our brain. So I live in Maui, and it's currently really windy right now. And I can feel a lot of the collective fear, rightfully so, because with it being really windy, the day that the fire happened, it was a very extremely windy day. So now, even though that there's blue skies, there's some clouds, there's some rain clouds, it's rain, the ground is wet, there is still this fear of what happens if there's a fire today. Do I have all of my bags packed? And so this is a very real fear that people have been living in every time the wind gets a little crazy. And so knowing that we have more protocols in place if that were to happen, knowing where our documents are, knowing where that we have gas in the car, all of these things really help us to make more informed decisions. And I could say that you're making that out of fear because you could just go about your day, but it's a very real fear for people. And so fears like your house burning down are so real. And I love this. They are so real. And it won't change the fact that you can move into an enclosed environment that's completely fire safe. When you hear and feel that wind, that body response, that mind response is going to continue in fear mode. For example, I was in Australia at the meerkat exhibit, and I was sitting there and playing with the meerkats, and all of a sudden the meerkats scattered and hid, and there was one just peeking its head out from the top. And it was really interesting because there was a helicopter high in the sky, and that meerkat alerted to the other meerkats that it was unsafe, that they needed to get and be in their burrows, I guess, until that threat had passed. And so they are at a zoo and there's not big birds around them, and they are safe, and they've been safe for a very long time, and yet their instinct is to hide when they sense a threat, like a bird in the sky, aka a plane. They don't know any different. They can't rewire their minds to be any different. But we can let go of some of those subconscious thoughts and feelings and reprogram our minds into alignment and into states of being. Now, we're still going to have very valid fears, like the people with Maui and the fires, until certain things are taken care of here. However, we can program ourselves to make very solid, aligned, grounded decisions with that information. So if you are ready to step into knowing those emotions and making very grounded decisions, and making decisions that aren't from fear, but they're actually from stability and alignment, put alchemize in the comments below, and I will send you some details on a brand new course that I am starting, which is all about alchemizing, which is turning your emotions into gold, to very solid things to stand on, for you to make the best decisions for your life, for you to be empowered and bring that confidence and those values forward, and to be authentically yourself. So I look forward to seeing you soon. And if you're just getting started and you're new to my work, I always tell people to start with the free values worksheet so that you can get very clear on your goals and your objectives to move forward. That link is in my bio, and if you'd like to do it together, there's a special link down there too. Have a wonderful day, and if you've not already done so, make sure you like and subscribe below.